Today we'll be discussing the career of the late actor Val Kilmer, and we'll be discussing throat cancer. This is Doctor versus Comedian. I'm Dr. Asif Doja, and this is the Doctor of Laughs.
Not a real doctor.
Ali Hassan. Every episode I pick a topic for Ali from comedy and entertainment, and I question him about it. Then Ali picks a topic for medicine and health and grills me on that topic. Now, legendary actor Val Kilmer passed away recently, so today we'll be discussing his life, his career, and his films. And Kilmer died from throat cancer, so in our second half, we're going to be discussing that disease. Now, Ali and I are very excited to talk about Val Kilmer. I think one of our favorite actors of the past 30 or 40 years. So
I would say so.
Let's get into it.
And by the way, I should add that this is embarrassing, but we had Val Kilmer as a topic that we were going to discuss because we both watched the documentary called Val. Mm-hmm. It's an A24 produced documentary. You can find it online. It's very good. And he had throat cancer. And that is a big part of this documentary. It's sort of the backdrop of it as he sort of looks back on his life and reflects on it and reflects on his personal limitations. Because of the throat cancer, he can't really speak anymore without the assistance of a device, which we'll get into in the second half. But now that he's passed away, we were like, now we have to talk. I don't know why we waited. But in any case, there's no bad time to talk about Val Kilmer. It is, of course, sad that he passed away. But if you saw that documentary, you could have sort of predicted that maybe this was a distinct possibility. But let's talk about him. He's a creative guy. He's a genius, certified genius, which many people would not know. I'm not sure if I fully appreciated how well regarded he was from a young age until I started watching the doc.
Yeah, and if you watch the doc, he actually kept meticulous videotapes. He videotaped back in the early 80s when nobody was using video cameras, and he just kept them all in storage. And then after he got the diagnosis of throat cancer, he said, okay, I want to kind of put this all together. So he collaborated with a few directors, and he made this movie. And his son actually narrates the movie in Val's voice.
Yeah. As Val's surrogate voice. He's not trying.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yes, exactly.
By the way, Asif, not to correct you, but there was one other actor who was filming with video cameras at an early age, probably in the 70s. You know who that was?
I don't.
Sean Penn, buddy. Sean Penn. He and his brother were raised by a man, Leo Penn. I think his father was also a director and an actor. So they had this video equipment. And Sean Penn was saying in an interview once how they would take this equipment and they would do what we would call sketches. But he's like, we would just get kids from the neighborhood. And he goes, I remember some of the moms would be like, no, my son cannot join you in the forest at dusk. What is happening? What do you guys do? What are you boys doing with all this video equipment? But actually they were Sean Penn talks about just being compelled to film all this. And I was reminded of that watching Val Kilmer. Somebody goes, shut off the video camera. And he goes, well, I'll shut off the video camera as soon as we start rehearsing. He just wanted B-roll. He just wanted all this stuff in the background. And interestingly, one of the people who shows up in his background, backstage filming is Sean Penn. Thought you might fill in the blank there, Asif. You did not. Sean Penn is there. Kevin Bacon is there in the background as they're filming. And
well, listen, just by the way, aside about Sean Penn, you mentioned his brother. Sean Penn had two brothers.
Oh, yeah.
One passed away, Chris Penn, who is the actor that people might know. And then Michael Penn, who sang the song No Myth, which was a big hit in the 90s. Do you remember that song? You remember.
Certainly don't.
He references Heathcliff from Wuthering Heights. But anyway, that's another story for another day.
There are things called asides, and that is the aside of the aside. I was already on a Sean Penn aside. You were like, let's dig in deeper and give something that people also don't care about.
Well, I'll bring it back to Val Kilmer. Sadly, Val Kilmer had a younger brother who passed away.
Yes.
And his brother Wesley, who died at age 16.
Okay, it's not an aside. Very good. Related.
Yeah. He had epilepsy, and if you want to hear more about epilepsy, we have an episode in the archives you can listen to. He sadly drowned in a jacuzzi at age 16, and that definitely affected Val. The documentary is interesting. He doesn't talk about it directly, but I do wonder if some of his choices in life, whether it was the movies he chose, the fact that he filmed everything, because his brother wanted to be a filmmaker. And you could see some of the home movies they do, the way they're edited are really good for kids just playing around. And maybe the difficulties he had on sets, maybe that has something to do with it. I'm not sure. But he got that news when he was a student at Julliard and obviously had to go back home, and quite devastating for him and his family at the time.
By the way, the youngest person at the time to ever be accepted into Julliard's drama division.
Mm-hmm.
And also, on that note, I didn't know this, but in 1983, he was in an off-Broadway show called The Slab Boys with Kevin Bacon and Sean Penn and Jackie Earle Haley. He also was on Francis Ford Coppola's radar, offered a role in The Outsiders, another 1983 film, a cult classic, had to decline because he had theater commitments. I don't think I knew anything about his theater world before this documentary. I didn't know anything about Julliard or the play. And I certainly didn't know that he was co-starring with the Sean Penns and the Kevin Bacons of the world. He always seemed like this lone wolf, this figure. He wasn't part of the Brat Pack. These are his contemporaries.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And of course, he tells a story in the movie that when he auditioned for Slab Boys, he got the lead role. And he's like, great, I'm the lead. And then, oh, actually, we just hired Kevin Bacon, so you're going to be the second lead. And then he's like, okay, great. And then they hire Sean Penn. He's like, okay, third lead for you.
Yeah.
So it was a bit, I think, disappointing for him. But again, this is, and he's kind of looking for his big break. All these contemporaries, as you said, getting their breaks with The Outsiders and things like that. But he did get his big break in Top Secret. And Top Secret, you've seen, Ali?
I've seen it. There's a scene in a prison. This is the scene. I mean, it's like a 90-minute movie, but this scene will live on in my mind forever, where he tries to escape a prison cell and there's a couple of vents and he's like, oh my God, this vent goes outside. He gets in a vent, crawls in the vent. It takes a while, Mm-hmm. This is like 1985 comedy, 1984. Mm-hmm. So we had better attention span. So it takes him a while to get through that vent. The vent leads him to the other vent and he comes right back in the prison. It's just a circular vent for no good reason. I'll never forget.
Yeah, the reason that humor I thought was so funny is because it's from the Zucker brothers and Abrams. These are the guys, Jim Abrams. These are the guys who did Airplane and all the Naked Gun movies. I mean, these were like a staple when I was growing up. But for some reason, my friends had seen Top Secret and I never saw it for some reason.
Until
I watched it yesterday.
Unbelievable.
So anyway, really good. It's funny. And he is just great in it. So he plays kind of like an Elvis type character who goes to Germany and gets involved in a spy caper. He sings all the songs in the film. And he actually released an album under the character's name, Nick Rivers. And the funniest part is he actually learned guitar. So he studied for 4 months to learn guitar. And he shows up on set. And then the director's like, yeah, you know what? It's actually funnier if you're just so bad, you just have to mime playing the guitar. So just do that. And he's like, oh, okay. I just learned the guitar for 4 months, but okay.
Okay. Two things about that. Number one, not the final time in his career that he'll play an Elvis type character, to quote Asif Doja. And number two, we're talking about the early 80s, and look at what we've already said. Youngest person to be accepted into Julliard at the time, doing off-Broadway theater, offered roles in some of the biggest films, The Outsiders, by some of the biggest directors, Francis Ford Coppola, has learned the guitar, is a lead in a comedy, the range already by 1983 is very impressive. And that's just the beginning.
He turned down a role in Blue Velvet, actually, David Lynch's Blue Velvet. He was in Real Genius, another comedy. And, well, now we're going to get to when you probably saw him for the first time.
Yes, now we're going to get to my frustrations with you, Asif, because you still haven't seen this film. But he was the Iceman, Tom Kazansky, which is a hilariously not sexy name.
I bet no one knew that was his name.
And then the Iceman comes.
Right.
No, because it's the military, so the teachers, the aviation teachers and the sergeants. Hey,
they say Kazansky.
Kazansky. Yeah, exactly. So it does come up, but man, nothing Kazansky about that guy when he takes off his shirt on the beach volleyball court. Am I right, ladies? And fellas, that role made me question who I was as a young boy. I mean, he really came on. And I will say that, you know how he was relegated to third fiddle on that Slab Boys off Broadway show. I feel like it doesn't matter. He comes in and he owns every single role he plays, wherever he plays it, whatever he's doing, whether it's a cameo or a lead man. This guy embodies that saying that there are no small roles. There are only small actors, and he's not one of them. Roger Ebert had said, and this is in the 90s, that if there's an award for the most unsung leading man of his generation, Kilmer should get it. But I would say, even when he's not a leading man, it's just memorable roles all the time.
Well, let me make a comparison. You see if you agree, because you saw Top Gun. I haven't seen it yet, but I've seen Top Gun Maverick. So
ridiculous.
When you think about the Star Wars movies, there was Luke Skywalker, Harrison Ford. Most people, especially myself included, Harrison Ford was the charismatic character, right? He's the scoundrel, the bad boy. I wonder if that's the same feeling in Top Gun. I certainly saw that in the first movie that I saw him in, which was Willow in 1988. So Willow is this fantasy movie directed by Ron Howard. I watched it recently, like last year or the year before with my daughter, and it was pretty good. Like it holds up pretty well. And you know why it holds up? Because
Ron Howard.
Val Kilmer, who plays Mad Mardigan, who is this kind of, again, it's a very Han Solo type role, the scoundrel. So Willow is the Luke Skywalker character, and Mad Mardigan is kind of the Han Solo character. And he's so good, he's so charismatic. I was like, where's the sequel? Let's do 3 of these movies as well, right? And so
Asif comes in 2025 asking for a sequel to a 1988 film.
Dude, they made a Willow follow-up series last year.
No, they did not.
They did.
Last year?
Yeah, it was on Disney Plus. It was canceled, and I never watched it.
And it didn't have Val Kilmer in it.
It did not.
So it doesn't achieve any of our goals.
Yeah, so that was 1988 Willow.
Yeah. Were you a fan of The Doors?
Dude, I think The Doors, 1991, movie by Oliver Stone. I think that's the crowning achievement of Val Kilmer's career. I think that's performance it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. Even praised by members of The Doors themselves. They said that they had trouble distinguishing his voice from Jim Morrison's voice. I don't think I knew that he sang. I assumed it was Jim Morrison's. I think I remember, actually, because I've seen it twice and I saw it on video years later. I do remember thinking his lip syncing is incredible.
Yeah, interesting. No,
there is no lip syncing. He's singing.
No, and in the documentary, they show him practicing. I think he totally inhabited that character. I remember it was 1991 it came out. I remember me and my friends started buying like Best of the Doors and getting super into the Doors at the time.
Yeah.
Just because of this movie. Like even that poster with Val Kilmer's face on it, he looks just like Jim Morrison. It's crazy. And now when I think of Jim Morrison in my head, I'm not sure if I'm thinking about Val Kilmer as that person. Or you know what I mean?
Yes, totally. Yeah.
And I think this proved to everyone, again, Top Gun, Willow, Top Secret, but this proved to everyone this guy is one of the best actors of his generation. So I was very curious at this point what was going to happen next.
Yeah. Well, what happened next is the Elvis comes back. I didn't even know it was him. I was like, kind of look like him. True Romance. There's a lot of scene stealers in that film.
Yeah.
And it's also early Tarantino trying to make his mark.
Mm-hmm.
But he comes back in True Romance, Val Kilmer playing Elvis Presley, who is like, it's not clear as I remember it. We don't know if that's a real person or not, but it's like this voice that talks to Christian Slater's character.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the angel on his shoulder or the devil on his shoulder type of thing, right? So I don't know if that person actually existed or it's just completely in his imagination. But he definitely existed on screen. Val Kilmer made sure of that. He was really good. And very, very subtle. And yeah, it was fantastic. And after True Romance,
yes,
is when Asif, please tell the people what he did.
Super exciting. Again, I think Jim Morrison, The Doors, I think this character is it's the 1A and 1B of his acting career.
Yeah.
It's Doc Holliday in Tombstone. Tombstone, man, that was one great movie. So much fun to see it. And I just remember leaving the movie theater, everybody thinking this role by Val Kilmer is so good. So he plays Doc Holliday, who's suffering from tuberculosis, and great performance.
I'm going to tell you something that's going to sound fake, but I promise you it's true. And I've told you this before on the podcast, that the times that I thought that maybe I had the potential to be an actor is when I would call in to my bosses and tell them I was sick, even though I wasn't sick. That's happened about 10 times over my life, probably more. But I would do a whole like preparation in my mind, and then I would get sick throughout the day. I made myself sick by believing it so much.
You were such a good actor.
That's when I was like, maybe there's something. Maybe I've got something here. I'm such an idiot. I actually can't go to work. But the same way in The Doors that you were like, now I'm like, I don't remember. I don't know if I was remembering Jim Morrison or I was remembering Val Kilmer doing Jim Morrison. I left that movie feeling like I had something wrong with my throat and feeling sick. That portrayal of a guy with tuberculosis, which I knew nothing about other than the fact that I'd gotten a shot for TB probably, meaning that I'd heard rumors about it. It was a thing. I felt physically ill from watching his performance, as though I had something. Something was wrong with my throat.
Yeah, you contracted it from him through the screen.
Yeah, through the screen, man. I'm telling you, it was the most unbelievable thing. We still talk about it to this day with the same level of passion.
If people haven't seen Tombstone, I really suggest you see it. There are tons of famous actors in it. Bill Paxton's in it. Kurt Russell plays Wyatt Earp. And apparently there's a whole backstory behind that movie where I guess it was a first-time director, I think, who wrote it as well, and really didn't know what he was doing. And Kurt Russell, they say, basically was actually the director of that movie and is what steered it away from being not just a disaster, but of course a huge success over time. It came out the same year as Wyatt Earp, and this was the Wyatt Earp movie that everybody remembers. Then after that, Ali, he, based on the strength of that performance of Doc Holliday, and of course he'd done The Doors, he was offered the superhero movie Batman Forever. So Joel Schumacher was now the new director. He had done Flatliners and a couple other movies. He was going to be the director of the Batman movies, and this would be Batman Forever. Michael Keaton, of course, played Batman before, but even before Michael Keaton said he didn't want to do the role anymore, Schumacher had seen Tombstone and thought, Kilmer is so good, I really would like him to play Batman. And then eventually Keaton decided to not return. And then, of course, the studio wanted William Baldwin, but then in the end, it went to Val Kilmer.
It's Slab Boys all over again, huh? You're not going to be number one. You're number two. You're a third choice, but you're the lead. But
he took the role without even knowing who the new director was and without reading the script. So let's just talk about this movie for a second. I think this was a bit of a turning point in Val Kilmer's career, and this is what I got from watching the documentary. I think this was probably an error on his part because you could see he was in The Doors, and then he was playing Doc Holliday. He's getting these dramatic roles, being respected for being an actor, and then he kind of does this U-turn and joins this huge franchise. I mean, again, maybe it was for the, I'm sure, truckload of money that they backed up to his house. But the problem with Batman Forever is, and I couldn't rewatch the whole movie, but I just picked out certain scenes with him. I thought he was actually a great Bruce Wayne. I thought he was actually a better Bruce Wayne than Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton, when he played Bruce Wayne, was basically playing Michael Keaton, kind of joking around, and I don't think of Bruce Wayne like that. Bruce Wayne is pretty serious, maybe a little bit of humor, but pretty serious. I thought he was a better Bruce Wayne. His Batman is a dry Batman. It's hard to play that role with any depth. I think some of the more recent actors have done it, but the movie's not good. It's ridiculous, poorly filmed. The villains are more over the top. It's just not a good movie. And so I think the fact that it was...
I'm sorry for your loss, Asif.
Yeah, it was a box office success, but it was...
Oh, was it? Okay.
And yeah, but I think this kind of where things took a bit of a turn for him.
I think you're right. Although, that said... 2 years later, in 1995, he is part of the unbelievable cast that makes up the movie Heat.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about this when we talked about the 90s and our movies of the 90s. It is considered one of the best crime drama films of the 90s. It is also considered one of my top 10 films. First of all, there was this unbelievable excitement about De Niro and Pacino being together on screen. That's one thing. But the supporting cast was phenomenal. And I really thought Val Kilmer, again, like echoes of Tombstone, he's injured for a lot of the movie and in pain and in distress. And he plays it really, really well. You got to keep it together. You can't show it. You're trying to pretend like all the pain you have, you don't actually have. And it just comes out. I mean, it's really This is where I say, too, like any role he inhabited. And let's just take a look at this. You've got, okay, so now in, I'd say, 11, 12 years, Francis Ford Coppola has asked for him, right? Quentin Tarantino has worked with him. Oliver Stone has worked with him. Now it's Michael Mann. So, yes, I think you are absolutely right about Batman was a misstep because he was in the conversations with all the best directors of the time. And I mean, I'm not to take away from Joel Schumacher, but something obviously went wrong there. And there are, now to get in a little bit to his character, and this is not talked about in the doc, but it's talked about widely in the news. Val Kilmer was reported as somebody who was difficult to work with, but never before that, never before Batman Forever.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I'm not sure. In 1996, he did the infamous Island of Dr. Moreau. I never saw that movie. I think some of my friends did.
I did. I'm one of your friends who did.
You did?
Of course I did, dude. It's Marlon Brando.
Oh, my God. Anyway, it's supposed to be brutal. So there's a whole actually
It's deeply disappointing. It was Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer. I mean, it's a recipe for minting money. This is going to be gold. It was somehow not that at all.
Yes, there's a whole documentary about it, which I want to watch. But the short story is, it was initially going to be done directed by this guy Richard Stanley. There were many issues. Marlon Brando was basically phoning it in, almost literally. He didn't want to learn his lines, so he had an earpiece in, and someone would just say the lines to him. Val Kilmer, it was his idol. Brando was his idol, and he was so disappointed. It led to conflict on the set. And Bruce Willis was actually supposed to be in the movie, play Val Kilmer's role, and then he dropped out because he was getting divorced from Demi Moore. That's when Val Kilmer came in, but that he was also getting divorced from his wife, Joanne Whatley at the time, who was in Willow with him. Rob Morrow from Northern Exposure was supposed to be in it. He quit and was replaced by David Thewlis. So huge problems with it. Then John Frankenheimer took over, very famous director, John Frankenheimer. Also. And so this whole thing, and this is, as you said, Ali, it's the beginning of this reputation that he's having of being very difficult to work with. Now, it could have just been circumstances, but this was a movie that basically made no money. It was a complete failure and considered one of the worst movies of all time. So I don't know, you saw it.
I did. It was awful. It was the most underwhelming thing I've ever had to witness. I wouldn't have even liked it if it was two no-names in it, right? We're talking about Brando and Kilmer. I mean, the level of disappointment is pretty significant if you're fans of either of them, and in my case, both of them. Yeah, things went sour quickly. The very next year, Val Kilmer had a lead role. He's back in the driver's seat, and it's playing this character, Simon Templar, in The Saint.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know the history of The Saint. I mean, this thing was written in the 1920s. It was brought back in the 1950s and the 1960s and the 1970s with various people at the helm. It's like a legendary franchise, I guess is the way you describe it.
Yeah, Roger Moore played Simon Templar in the TV show The Saint, and that's, of course, one of the reasons he got James Bond. So, yeah, and this was the kind of reboot movie, I guess, in the 1990s. I never saw it.
And this was meant to be more fun, less serious, not as much Mission Impossible, a little bit more with fun stuff, a lot of disguises. In fact, they say that Val Kilmer was pushing for more disguises, and they were like, we can't actually do that because we're saving that for another movie called Mission Impossible that we're doing.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Showing off his skills, Kilmer also wrote the poetry for this film, The Saint. I enjoyed it. I like action movies like this. I like stuff that's a true escapism. I like all the Bourne, the Ultimatum, the Bourne Meatloaf, the Bourne everything, all of it. I like all the Bournes. I like all these type of movies. So The Saint was great. I wouldn't say it was like Val Kilmer back to form, but it was enjoyable. It was a nice palate cleanser after The Island of Dr. Moreau. Let me say that.
Well, and then he kind of goes into this period where there's not a lot of stuff going on, not a lot of remarkable movies. And I would say for close to 10 years, not much is happening with his career. And then he's in this movie. Have you seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang with Robert Downey Jr.?
I don't think I have. And the fact that I'm saying I don't think I have tells me what I need to know about it. I should remember every single Val Kilmer movie. And I also love Robert Downey Jr., so I don't know if I've seen it.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it right now. I have not seen it.
So it's made by Shane Black, who wrote tons of movies, including Lethal Weapon, Last Boy Scout.
Last Action Hero.
Yeah, the movies that you've definitely seen. So he just is known for his sense of humor that he combines with it. And
Yeah.
it was such a crazy movie because it's like Robert Downey Jr. at this time had no career. He was done. And Val Kilmer was actually the more famous and more successful of the people. And this movie is so hilarious. I remember seeing it and just thinking, oh my God, I'm so glad these guys are back. And for Robert Downey Jr., then he made Iron Man, right? This is and how he became this, highest paid actor in Hollywood. And of course, now he's an Academy Award and everything.
And Shane Black, by the way, wrote and directed Iron Man 3.
Because they were such good friends
Yeah.
that he wanted to come back. So, by the way, this term "kiss, kiss, bang, bang," I thought it was an Italian director who came up with it, but it's basically like this is the spy genre: kiss, kiss, bang, bang. That's the fun stuff, right? Like it's violence and sexiness and stuff. Anyway, so I thought this was going to be Val Kilmer. Yeah, he's back. Great, but then it just also didn't happen. He did a couple other things. He was the voice of Kit, and I love Kit from Knight Rider. Kit is the talking car, by the way. He was the voice. I didn't realize that on the reboot TV show, which I never watched.
Yeah.
Maybe I would have watched it if I knew he was the voice. And then in the 2000s, he was working on a film about Mark Twain and the interaction with Mary Baker Eddy, who is the founder of Christian Science. We can talk about Christian Science in the next section if we want. And so during that, he was trying to play Mark Twain. So he started a one-man show where he plays Mark Twain. I had no idea he did this. And the documentary shows him in character as Mark Twain doing the one-man show.
A lot of makeup. A lot of time in a makeup chair.
And eventually released as a 90-minute film, which I haven't seen, but apparently is quite good. And then I hadn't seen him for a while. Then I saw him again. This was right before he got sick. He was in MacGruber. He played the villain in MacGruber. And MacGruber's a pretty funny movie. I know it seems like a one-note movie. Do you ever watch it?
I've not seen MacGruber.
It's not bad. They made a series afterwards which wasn't as good, but that was good. And of course, he reprised his role as Iceman in Top Gun Maverick, which I did see. But of course, by then he'd already had these issues with his voice. So just starting this next section, Ali, we're going to be talking about throat cancer, but I just want to intro this a bit with what happened with Val Kilmer. So in 2014, he was doing that Mark Twain one-man show, Citizen Twain, and then he lost his voice. So again, that happens, to performers, so he didn't think too much of it, but it didn't improve. And then he started noticing a lump in his throat, but he didn't seek medical care, and then he started vomiting blood. He was initially reluctant to seek treatment because of his belief in Christian Science, which he was raised in and he believed very strongly in. And that's why when he would tell people what he had, he says, doctors have suggested I have throat cancer. Because I don't know a lot about Christian Science, and I certainly do not want to offend anybody, but from what I've been reading, Christian Science is a philosophical idealism. So they say reality is spiritual and the material world is an illusion. So disease is a mental error rather than a physical disorder. So a form of prayer can correct these beliefs that's responsible for the illusion of health or illness, right?
Yeah. Anytime you see the words somebody refused medical treatment due to their blank, I would say 3 or 4 out of 5 times it's Christian Science beliefs.
Yeah, Jehovah's Witness also.
That's the other one.
We see that as well. Anyway, so I think Kilmer has 2 kids, and it sounds like they really pushed for him to get treatment. So he had to get a procedure on his trachea. He had to get chemotherapy, 2 tracheostomies, which is when you put a breathing tube in your trachea, in your throat. And he needed to use a feeding tube to be fed. And by 2020, he had been cancer-free. And then he passed away most recently. This just came out while we were prepping the podcast, but he died of pneumonia, it sounds like. So it wasn't directly from his cancer, but obviously if you had throat things, breathing issues, there's many risk factors for getting a pneumonia and dying. That's ultimately what he passed away from, but it was from this throat cancer.
Okay, so let's back up and talk about what throat cancer is. I think we all feel like we have an understanding of what it means. You say it. nobody goes, what is that? But in fact, I'd like to hear what it really is.
Yeah, to make it as simple as possible, it's a cancer of the upper part of your breathing apparatus. So your trachea, which is your breathing tube, your larynx, which is your voice box, and then I'm just using the colloquial terms, but any cancer forming in that area. The most common type is something called a squamous cell carcinoma. That's the most common type, but it's pretty common. It's about 1/3 of all cancers of the head and neck, and it occurs in about 175,000 people in the US in 2018. So it's not that uncommon.
You'd mentioned that Val Kilmer ignored something in his neck, this growth. Why don't we talk about what the symptoms are and things that maybe should be investigated or not ignored?
Yeah, good point. So the most common symptom is hoarseness of the voice, which is what he had. Now, again, that can happen, Ali, when you're screaming at a concert that you're enjoying a lot, or perhaps yelling at the players when your son is playing hockey. You're yelling at the refs and the other players on the opposite team.
Only my son. Only yell at my
Yeah.
son. Never anybody else. No one else is to blame.
So if that hoarseness lasts a long period of time, so it's not just overuse of your voice, that would be very suspicious that this could be a possible throat cancer. Other symptoms, a constant sore throat. I would say especially if you're not sick. Like you don't have a fever, you don't have chills, you don't have a runny nose as well, but just a sore throat that keeps on going. That would be a bit unusual. Feeling that something's stuck in your throat all the time. Difficult or painful swallowing. And then maybe difficulty breathing or trouble breathing. And then, as Val Kilmer said, if you have a lump in your neck, it could not just be, it could be pushing exteriorly. And of course, other things like cancer, like weight loss, fatigue, etc.
I think the conventional wisdom would have been that it's associated very closely with smoking, as if we talk about risk factors.
Yeah.
I get the feeling that's not necessarily the case anymore.
No, it is.
I mean, it is, but there's also many non-smokers, is what I'm saying, getting throat cancer. So what are the other risk factors?
Yeah, so let's talk about it. But you're right, 70% of cases have a history of smoking, and current smokers have a higher risk than ex-smokers. That's, again, we've talked about lung cancer in the past, but that's why they always encourage people to quit if they can. But alcohol consumption is also a risk factor. And it's unclear if it's because people often smoke and drink at the same time or not. They also think that marijuana may be a risk factor in younger patients. So, like Ali was implying, maybe smoking cigarettes is going down, but marijuana use is going up. So maybe we'll see that kind of change over time. What else? Unfortunately, secondhand smoke exposure. Right. So again,
these are all things that are literally going down your throat and damaging your gullet, right? Yeah. It's rarely things that a non-smoker, non-drinker, somebody not exposed to pollutants. That's quite rare to have somebody.
Yeah, exactly. It would be unusual, quite unusual. I mean, not impossible, but quite unusual.
Yeah.
There's other things that are not controllable, like being male, your race, a white or black race seem more common than other populations. But there are some occupational things. So asbestos, nickel fumes, wood dust in woodworkers. So again, anything that you're kind of inhaling, as Ali is saying, and Agent Orange. If you recall Agent Orange from
President Trump? Who's Agent Orange? What is that again?
So Agent Orange was a defoliant used in the Vietnam War. So they sprayed it so that the jungle, trees and vines and things like that would all die, allowing them to see the Viet Cong and identify them better, because the camouflage capabilities and their ability to do this guerrilla warfare was really hindering the U.S. efforts in Vietnam. So the problem is that also had lots of health effects, Agent Orange, associated with many different types of cancer that later affected these vets who returned to America. I mean, I'm sure it also affected many people in Vietnam as well, obviously.
Thank you for mentioning that, yeah.
But, it became so prominent. So then by the time we're getting into the early 80s, everybody's talking about Agent Orange and the damage that it caused. A little history lesson for you guys. Yeah.
Love it. How's it diagnosed?
So your doctor is going to examine you, take a history, ask about smoking and all these other risk factors. But in the end, they have to observe the larynx. So you've seen the doctors, some of them still use it. The mirror that you see on the headband of a doctor, some of them still use that and use some other mirrors to take a look at it. But now I think most doctors use a fiber optic scope. and they'll put it in. Usually they'll put it in through your nose, and then it'll go down, and they'll be able to look at your larynx, trachea, etc., and then see if they actually physically see a tumor there. And if they do, they'll biopsy. Usually they'll put you to sleep and then biopsy it. You may need an MRI or CT scan, but that's essentially how it's diagnosed. They have to visualize that area of your throat.
That's scary. And then once something is found, what is the treatment?
Well, as you know, Ali, there's different stages for cancer. So the early stages can be treated with usually just a single type of treatment. So either surgery or radiation, and that can often preserve the larynx, so you could still be able to speak afterwards, but you might have some issues. So Val Kilmer, I'm not sure exactly, because they said he had surgery and radiation, so he was able to speak, but his voice was obviously quite different. And we didn't really talk about this, about the documentary, but, because of this, he can't act, right? And so he goes and does a lot of like Top Gun and other conventions and things like that, signing autographs, which is, and of course he's ill at the time, so it's a bit sad in terms of what happened. But again, at least he seemed to be doing well. Again, he did not have a relapse of cancer, as far as we know, that caused his death. But getting back to the treatment, advanced stage disease, these patients do a lot worse. So you need to do multimodal therapy. So surgery, then radiation, chemotherapy, or a combination of all these. Your oncologist would decide.
So we can assume his was more advanced because he did ignore something at the beginning also, right? An initial.
It's hard to say, but then he did pretty well. But he did have two modalities, according to him. So I'm not actually sure. And he never has come out and said exactly what he had.
Two modalities, which means two different
types of treatment, surgery and radiation, he said.
Got it.
Well, he said he had a procedure, which I'm assuming is surgery and radiation. And I don't think he had chemotherapy from the information that I could see.
What is the prognosis? How do people generally, again, there's different stages, obviously, but you can die from throat cancer, I imagine.
For sure. The 5-year survival rate is 60%. So more than half of people will be surviving after 5 years. That's what happened with Val Kilmer. But of course, that means 40% of people will have passed away. And again, those are often the ones with a more severe stage. And you maybe didn't respond to some of these multiple treatments.
Okay, so I think the takeaways are don't smoke. Certainly don't start if you have not already. Quit smoking. Watch Tombstone. Asif, watch Top Gun.
Yes.
And everybody else, we've given you a variety of entertainment to binge on, including this documentary, Val, if you haven't seen it. It's quite interesting. Now, if you want, as I said, if you want the gossip on his life and that controversy, this is not, this is made by the Kilmer family, basically, or with their stamp of approval. So you don't have it there. But there's plenty sort of gossip that you can find. And some people said he was the best to work with, and other people, directors, one director called him childish and impossible. So I guess it depended what you were getting.
And multiple things can be true at once, right?
Yeah.
I think all of us, are sometimes in a bad mood, sometimes in a good mood. And if it's amplified by these long days on sets, I don't know. But I think it was very sad about his death. And again, I think there are some performances that are just like, they're classic cinema performances. So hopefully this will encourage people to take a look at Val Kilmer's career. Reach out to us. Let us know what you guys thought. drvcomedian@gmail.com, Dr. V Comedian on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. We're everywhere. Again, check out our shorts that we publish on lots of different platforms, but including YouTube and Instagram. You can check those out. Give them a little, I don't know, what do you do? Like a heart or a like or something? I don't know.
Oh, sure.
Sure. Why?
Love, some love.
And Ali, what do you got going on for the end of April and May?
End of April and May, I will be in Winnipeg at the Winnipeg Comedy Festival, performing on some smaller shows, not on the bigger festival stuff, and just sort of, enjoying my life there. I think that's what I'm going to be doing. And then right after that, in early May, there is a brand new festival called the Departure Festival. The likes of Dave Chappelle will be a part of this festival, and Mustafa the Poet and Bryan Adams. It's a whole wild lineup of folks.
Bryan Adams, the singer?
Yeah. So this festival is built off if you want to say, the ashes of Canadian Music Week.
Okay.
which was an attempt to be South by Southwest, but instead North by Northwest or North by Northeast. But yeah, so Departure Festival has filled that void. It's built on what had been going on there and built above and beyond that. So I'll be hosting a comedy show, fantastic comedy show with those breakout artists from around Canada, and then hosting a couple of panels as well. So you can look up Departure Festival.
Yeah. Where is that?
That is in Toronto. I buried the location. It is in
Okay.
Toronto.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear this Canadian comedian Dave Chappelle. That's very interesting. I'm looking.
It's not all Canadian. Not
No,
all
I mean,
Canadian,
he's
but
like
it's
the
really-
headliner. I mean, obviously people are going to come for that, but then hopefully stay for some of these panels and
Yeah.
workshops. Is there a workshop anywhere?
There's some workshops, I think. Yes. Panels. You know
Panels,
what?
panels.
Departurefest.com. You can
Yeah,
find that.
check it out. And one more thing to remember before we go, just remember that although I'm a doctor, I'm not your doctor. Medical issues we talk about are for your interest and information only, and they're not medical advice. Please consult your medical professionals for actual medical advice. Thanks for listening.
Bye.